But as with all things, there is a beginning, as far as we know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So eschatology is the study of things or events or signs that the end, whatever it is coming. But when is it coming, and where are we now in the history of the Earth or the universe? Assumedly, there was a beginning, and that's a tricky supposition, a beginning, because everything we know about space and the universe tends to cause us to realize that change is what we're really dealing with instead of beginnings and ends. Hence, when we, or an eschatologist speaks of the end, the assumption would be that it would be the end of change, but it also might be the final change, whereafter change would not be possible. Now that is very difficult to conceive of. In other words, that means that everything would, in a sense, stop. And as we know, the universe is constant movement, constant matter in motion. To deal with the end, we have to deal with stuff. Stuff is the, or somewhat like to call it matter, but in talking about matter or thinking about matter, we think of the solid things that we can see in space or the universe. And these things are like apart, like there's a moon over here and an earth over here and a sun out there. But the things between we think of as nothing, as like the ether or just a void or just space. But space is also stuff. That we can see the stuff. When you look up into the sky or the area surrounding the Earth, we see blue. Now those are, we're looking through a number of gases to get that perception. So in other words, gases are stuff. In other words, everything is stuff. Within the universe then, there's just stuff, all stuff. In other words, this would apply in a sense to the Big Bang Theory, wherein a solid exploded and filled what we now call space. But of course where the solid resided is up for grabs. I have a theory, or more than a theory, a calculated hypothesis. But anyway, everything is stuff. So in other words, when the big whatever, say it did occur as a big bang, it was the separation of the heavy stuff, and the things that went between the heavy stuff were more or less less visible than the heavy chunks that we call stars or debris in space. So we have stuff and debris stuff, so to speak. Hence, and plus the fact that the metamorphosis of the stuff, in other words, the changing, is created by the movement. In other words, the movement shaves or fashions the stuff so that it looks round, so that it looks more stylized. So the assumption would be that closer to the beginning, if you want to call one point in time, which is a man-made concept, if you want to call it the beginning, things were more than likely cruder. See, this is but of course these things are only, we can't go back in time. We cannot go back in time. There's no way. I mean, H.G. Wells can do his time machine and all that, but these things are just conjecture. They're just delightful little anecdotal things that are based on quasi-science that, I mean, anything is possible. anything in the future. It's possible perhaps to break down the body. Anyway, we don't want to get into that right now. What we're dealing with is the beginning. It's like a sentence. The beginning, the middle, and the end. Isn't that what we see around us as far as the human life? There's the beginning, the birth, the coming to a fruition of the human being, and then the leaves falling off the tree, or the graying hair, and the lines and the flesh starting to hang. That is the end. In other words, and I'm not the person who's bringing up the end. The end has been spoken about as far as the universe and the world for centuries. The history of man is entwined in a concept of time that, as I was saying, begins, works its way through, and finite, ends. So the question is the old books talk about millennia, they talk about signs, some of the so-called seers or prophets, which the prophet or the seer or the people that follow these people cults, I don't accept these words as being relevant. A person either produces or defines something and it makes sense, whether or not it's true or not, because truth is not absolute as far as we can determine. A person defines based on what they've seen. If they see things developing throughout their lifetime and in the readings and of other people that seem to follow a certain course, then they develop along those lines. They postulate based on fact. If you postulate based on just nonsense, naturally you've got nonsense, and we don't want we want to stay as far away from nonsense as possible, because there's lots of that around. In fact, people are living in a time when fiction has become almost as acceptable, and perhaps more acceptable than reality. All the television programs, the books, fiction, even the fictionalization of celebrity and events. They take on like wars, like World War II or the Civil War. They take when they're retold by, as time goes on in this current age when we have computers and computer readouts and 3D presentations of things. We've changed these things into the wars into entertainments. They become stylized, and we can't see them as just years ago when there was folklore, and the tribes and the people would sit around and they would relate things. Of course, they probably added a little bit of hyperbole to the whole thing also, but now it's becoming, in other words, let me get back to fiction. We're dealing with a world of fiction, and fiction becomes the reality. People talk about movies now and soap operas more than they talk about the end of the world, because the end of the world, the connotation is it's like, and that's it. That's it. That's no more to talk about. What is there to talk about? But now we get into the nitty-gritty of the entire thing. Now, what is going on the planet to cope with the end of the world? Technology? Space program? A space program. Are you there? Wake up! It's not only NASA, it's the European Space Program, the Asian Space Program. You know, in French Guiana, there's a place called Karoo, and the French have a launching site down there. Oh, it's labeled as a commercial space launching site for satellites. You know all about that, right? The application, of course, is there for the same conclusion, or the same concluding events that the shuttle and the other space vehicles and technology are geared to, and that is an escape from space. I didn't say from Earth. I've had people writing to me over the years talking about, what planet are you going to? There's a little thing that I do. I call, or have captioned, calling the area outside, I didn't say the space, the area outside of space as C. C, like the letter C. In other words, and the little ditty goes, to see is to know. In other words, whoever gets beyond the realm of space will then know and realize. This is, of course, just a way of trying to get people to think about space in total, to be able to visualize that space has bounds. If we would go along with the supposition that space was ever expanding, what is it expanding into? Then it still has limits. We have to have limits. Our minds demand limits. And if that is the case, then limits are natural. Our mind being a natural product of our genes, of the addition of so-called education to these things. It's that we don't randomly come to conclusions as some would have us believe, that a lot of things are nonsense. Everything really, even though it's nonsense, comes out of the mind. In other words, sometimes out of frustration, nonsense occurs. Maybe that's what causes so much fiction to be wanted. Okay, so let's get back to space containing stuff, and consideration that outside of space there is no stuff. It's a different realm. I don't know if Einstein hinted at it, or I can't recall his evaluation of, in other words, everything to him was like opposites, and in all sciences, positive and negative, yin and yang, black and white, this and that, truth and falsehood. Everything seems to, and false, or there's good and evil, but the point is that these things are not mutually exclusive. One depends on the other. You have good and you have bad, which we do have in our minds. If something is generally accepted, it must have some basis in reality. Good and bad, good and evil, the same thing. Black and white. They're opposite, but one is not good, or bad and good are interchangeable. One cannot exist without the other, is what I'm trying to say, and I'm having a hard time saying it. So, if there's space, and there's matter, and stuff, as I call it, then the opposite would be the nothingness, or that's exactly what it is. As far as we're concerned, nothingness could still be something. It is nothingness. There is no such thing as nothing. There can't be. Nothing can't exist. But in saying, as juxtapositioning something against the opposite, we would tend to say nothing. But I think I would rather say there's something, and then there's the opposite of something, because it is still something, but it's a different something. Anyway, that gets a little bit tricky, but okay, so what End of the World Enterprises is purporting is that what is going to happen is knowable. And I think that everything is based in life on trying to know what's coming up. If you know what's coming up, you can control whatever it is. Okay, now, since there is a space program, we have concluded that that the space program has been set up. This is very difficult to say, because then it gets into the realm of conspiracy. If the space program, and somebody knowingly has set up the space program, something, I'm not saying it personally, those are all possibilities, some being, some essence that controls the planet, and perhaps then space, if this has been set up to escape, think of the ramifications, it's a conspiracy. And you're not in on it. And I'm not in on it. But I have dared to challenge, based on what I'm looking at differently than most people look at it. People look at the space program, and as they're looking at it, it's like a television or a radio, more like a television. In fact, just like a television piece. They show you something here, like here's the space program, here's the camera, here's the space program. They're showing you the equipment and voicing over it with the conclusions they want you to have about it. These are the henchmen for the essence. They're saying to you, just like, what is it, Neil Armstrong said, he didn't say porcupine pie. He said, one small step for man, one giant step for mankind. What did that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's not for you. I mean, do you want to go to Mars? In fact, nobody wants to go to Mars. It isn't a question, but it's not. These places are not even habitable. Do you want to go to the sun? Okay, one of the stories that have been put out, I think one of the basic stories is that the space program is to advance science, to check out medicine, is to be able to do things in space without gravity, to give us better medicines, better cures for cancer, better cures for perhaps the mind, perhaps it's a better working environment, perhaps there's less pressure. Perhaps, but not necessarily so. And as far as going to other planets, what planet would anybody want to go to? The moon, does it look great? I mean, you got deserts right here on this planet. If you want to take one of these, like a moon rover, you can go across the Sahara Desert or the Mojave Desert or any desert, Gobi Desert. If you want to go to Asia, there's plenty of deserts. I mean, why is anybody spending their money, or why are the governments, and why are the people willing to put up with having it? See, it isn't just that it's happening. You're paying for it. It's not just happening. It's not just like something the government is doing like as a little experiment. I mean, there are experiments involved, but you're paying for them and you're not questioning anything because you have that voiceover mentality. They're telling you about the one small step and the giant step, and they're telling you about the rocks they brought back from the moon, and they're talking about the Hubble telescope. And what about the Hubble telescope? What are they looking for? If space is contained in a balloon, as I'm suggesting, and there's a way out of space, like a hole in the balloon or a window in space, wouldn't that be something that a Hubble telescope might be looking for? What have you seen in the pictures? When Hubble was up there first, they tell us that it wasn't functioning properly. Let me suggest that perhaps they've seen what they wanted to see. They didn't want you to see it, so they just refocused it on something else. How about like the face on Mars? Did they see that? Did it look something like, well, let me see. Oh, I don't have it here. Somewhere. I had a face, and I just wonder, well, a face is a face. The point is, what is the face, and is there a face, or are there other things on Mars they didn't want you to see, or on other planets, or in space itself? Does the stuff that I say that looks like the void, are they taking pictures of that? In other words, the gases and the things. First of all, the gases and the values that were given to gases around certain planets before space exploration, as far as man going into space and so on are concerned, these gases have now been proven to have different values. In other words, as far as density and heat and so on and so forth, because the equipment is becoming more sophisticated. So we are stuck with a situation in which nobody's challenging the powers that be that are taking your money and siphoning it off into a program that actually produces nothing for anybody. And the population explosion has been allowed to go forward because there's plenty of people, if people in the space program or any other, first of all, every other discipline or every other job or every menial, no matter how menial a task, facilitates the worldwide space program. It loosens up or allows people to spend their life, for instance, astronauts, who are not the only ones, scientists, who do produce nothing. You don't eat anything on your, they'll tell you, oh, well, we have this food now for campers, like freeze-dried ice cream or something, or freeze-dried stew, but that's not something developed for us. They can, naturally they'll market it. It's what I call the slag product of the space program, just as televisions are the slag product. Cameras, all airplanes, all ballistics, even a bullet is the same the same kind of a science as throwing or firing. With the initial capsules, when John Glenn went up there, it was more or less thrown up. It was like a slingshot. Now the thing has become more sophisticated. It's more like a rifle being shot, something being shot out of a rifle from the earth. So in other words, this slag product, they sell you to create a base. Like, take the television industry. The television now, as you know, has become much more sophisticated to the extent that it's gone from the cathode ray tube, to the cathode ray tube still exists, from the black and white to the color, now to the size, to the modification of it, and the tubes that were the ancillary parts of it have now been, everything is called printed circuits in the television, and because of that, you have picture-in-picture, you have the capability of more channels, you have, it's old technology as far as the space program is concerned. It's old technology. And they sell in other words, not only are they able to sell it to people who it gives them something to buy with the money they get for whatever participation they have in this endeavor, which is, I say, is all inclusive of all disciplines and all jobs and everything, all of everything. It also becomes a kind of monitor for you. You're looking at it. You look at it. It tells you about. They call it the news. Okay, the news. The news is basically, okay, look, the news is a very tricky thing the way it's defined. The news is somebody in a car crash, some random shooting, some anomalous thing that really doesn't affect your life, and then they slip in along with it the lead stories, like there's an invasion today of certain territory by usually the big powers, okay, and without telling you that they're going in there looking for natural resources or to round the people up and train them to do whatever they want done, and it's presented to you just as part of the news. In other words, it becomes, you might in your mind say, well, one part of the news is more important than the other, but in putting it all together, it really isn't. A football game, perhaps to some people, is more important than an invasion or some leader that's been killed, or the same thing with a baseball game, or just a plain entertainment song and dance or cop show or whatever. These things are all intertwined. It's a mishmash. So in other words, by you looking at this thing in your off hours, you're not thinking about what the space program is doing. They do have a channel, it's a NASA channel available, but how many people, I've talked to people, and the really wild part of this NASA channel is that when there's a space launch is when it really comes on. Otherwise, it just has like channel so-and-so, educational television or something like that on there, and it's just blank, or I mean not blank, but it just has this card, and that's what they're sending out. That's all. But as soon as they launch something, where do they go? And what did I tell you about what's been the reasons for its being launched? Some vague thing about, well, they're going to put a piece of equipment up there, or they're going to check the limb, or they're going to go out and fix the telescope, whether or not it needed fixing or not. We don't really know. You don't really know. We don't really know. Okay, or not okay. This channel, this NASA channel, what does it do? It goes to Houston or the Kennedy Space Center or someplace like that, and it holds the camera on people who are monitoring the shuttle. In the instance of the shuttle, each one of these things goes up, it just sits in these rooms, in this one room or another, and just holds the camera on these people for hours. I mean, how many people are going to look at it? And with no voiceover, an occasional, maybe say a readout on the screen that there'll be a wake-up call for the astronauts in 2 hours, or something like that. And then when they do wake up, or while they're doing their daily routines, an occasional link up and connection between the room and the shuttle. You know, how are things, Jack? They had one recently with school children asking, I wouldn't say inane questions, because I mean, that's kind of demeaning to the children, but the point is that the questions were like, how does it feel to be an astronaut? What school or college did you go to? We're not talking about the mission and what all the culmination of all these missions are trying to accomplish. It's painful to look at these things. It's painful to think that they're able to take these young minds and the people that are watching, whoever they are. I don't think children in a classroom could bear to look at a television set where it's like just sitting and watching. You've been, of course, you have in a store or in an office or say a store where they're monitoring for people shoplifting. They got this camera on. Would people sit and just watch that for 2 hours? And if they did, would they come back again? But the people that are interested, the children in school that are interested, naturally, when they ask these questions, perhaps they'll be inclined to become astronauts or to go into some physics programs that they ordinarily wouldn't. In other words, it's sort of a recruiting program in that sense, or it could be. It probably is. But okay, so I'm saying that the space program is fixed. That it's a con job. It's a con job, and all the religions that are talking about, look at the religions. The religions talk about God and a heaven, and the indication is that it's up there somewhere, and that God is coming back in the sense of Jesus, or in the sense of I guess let me just stick with Jesus. That seems to be the predominant movement. I mean, from this country, it seems to sweep across the world. We know there are other people that don't, but they've been more or less left out of the mainstream. The mainstream religion is Christian, and the secondary would be probably the West springs from the Judeo or Jewish, and that's the main. And the God that they speak of is a man God, which is a great concept. A man, and people can relate to him. It is Jesus. Okay, then there's a heaven, and it's sort of nondescript. Nobody knows what is in this heaven. As I said, I was talking before about what's outside of the universe. Is it heaven? Well, if it is, they're not saying it's outside the universe. They're not exactly saying where it is. I've read and heard that there's in heaven, that there's like a God, whatever that is, and it exudes this light, or that light, a light. It's a blinding, but not blinding. It's very bright. It's the beatific vision is what they call it. It's just all sweetness and light. Okay, this kind of a concept holds people in place. There's the man God you can pray to go to this place to overcome maladies, to overcome sickness, and eventually death, because the religion itself teaches an afterlife, that Jesus is going to come back, he's going to reward the dead, he's going to lift the dead out of the ground. I don't want to get into this too much because it's kind of childish, but there's people out here, I mean, you look at your television, I mean, if you just doubt, I mean, you don't even have to go to your local churches, there are television ministers talking about this, and it's all vague, but the people are listening in their mind, they've been fed it so long it becomes real. So they're talking about a heaven. They're talking about another place, but they're not defining it in realistic terms. They're not defining it as a place that's attainable through technology. They're explaining it as a place that can be attained because God can create wonders and do all kinds of things and come back from the dead, the man God, and that the other God, the Father and the Holy Ghost and this other form or person of God or persons of God are out there right now, and they are just, and of course I don't know what Jesus is whiling his time away doing right now, but evidently just waiting for like this millennium or whatever, and it's supposed to occur in some people's minds and in some interpretation. All this stuff is up to interpretation. If you think law was bad as being an interpretive science, theology is just strewn with interpretation. So people are saying the so-called theologians, some of them are indicating, if not outright saying, that the end of the world, the closing down of the universe is going to occur. It was supposed to have occurred before after Christ died. Didn't happen. I think after the first 1,000 years, that was 1,000 years, that was a millennium. Then the second one, and it's supposed to occur around the time, the year 2000. But why? Why would it occur? Why would it occur any time? Realistically, why is Jesus waiting, or God, or whatever, waiting for a certain date? The only thing to wait for a date is hardware, technology, reality. Can you build something? Will the tenacity of metal be where it should be? Will the plastics? Will all the different elements that are absolutely essential? Spaceship and leaving. Pardon me. Must be something in my head. Somebody said to me the other day, well, the universe is like so vast, what kind of a ship could they build? It would take forever to get out of it. If it's as vast as... But the Earth and the Sun, whoa, that's a big job, huh? 93 million miles away from it, huh? You know? And all the planets of greater distances away, just in this one planetary system, are all traveling through space, through the universe. And astrologers track it and find some stability in thinking. I'm talking about mental stability and thinking, well, these things all work in unison. They're always there. The stars here, that's always there. When it's facing this way, I mean, all these things, there are certain things in the firmament, they call it, which is kind of a strange way of dealing with space. They call it a firmament, which comes back to what I call stuff. In other words, they're stuck in stuff. We're stuck in stuff. We're not traveling around in nothing around say the sun that the Earth is traveling around. It's not just falling through nothing. It's falling through stuff. Just because you can't see it, you can't see a lot of gases. I can't see you, but I know you're there. Anyway. Okay, so we have all this falling and all these things occurring. Now, okay, isn't it possible now that the planetary systems are also moving through the universe? Whether or not this is provable or not, see, science may have come up with some physicists may say, well, it is, and other ones will say it's not. I'm saying that since everything seems to be moving, and everything, well, I said seems, is moving, let me say is, and other things that are far further away, we would assume have similar values, and not the same, but similar values, that these rotations, these movements are also occurring similarly. Hence, perhaps, and whoever's in charge of this space program would be able to tell you better, but they're not going to speak to you because you or I don't mean anything to them, or it, or whatever. The Earth in this planetary system is moving around the universe, sometimes in closer to the center, sometimes further toward the skin or the viscous substance that encapsulates space. Isn't it possible then that at some point in time the Earth will be closer to the skin of the balloon than at other times? It would seem so to me. But anyway, okay, we go back now and go the other way. The ships are being built. You buy the story that it's just a random science, that it's just something that man, this is one of the stories, of course you've heard this one, that man has this destiny that he must, whatever he does, he must do. That it's just part of his nature, and therefore we don't have to know why we're paying for this thing. Our betters, the people with the better gene pools, are they've set it up. They do it all for us. You see, it's just like voting. You vote for them, and they set up the candidates. And in other places, then they have kings, and they're just born. So it's everything. The betters are doing everything for us. We don't really have to have too much input. Okay. Okay. So we have this constant movement. Perhaps the stuff itself and life itself can't exist without movement. This is true inside you. Your blood is moving constantly. Your heart is pumping it. It's continually moving. When it stops, boom, flesh starts to deteriorate, turns to dust. Bones, after a while, after enough time, they'll fossilize. They'll turn right into just. So without life, we have death or a change, a really ultimate change, a really drastic change. In other words, life is the only thing that really counts, that we count on. We don't to look for things that are dead, perhaps just counterpoint life, but they don't really have any active part in our thinking, or shouldn't have. In fact, I have come to the conclusion that all the archaeologists in the world, the ones that are all funded by some group or other, the James P. Hancock Foundation. It's like that public television, they get this money and they're out there and they're with their little paint brushes and they're wiping off this little tooth, or they got a piece of a comb, or a cup. You think that's really what they're out there for? I think they're out there for. They're looking for the minerals. They're looking for parts of perhaps the original plans, perhaps the original plans for the escape from this planet are not completely known and are only coming along piecemeal and go hand in glove with the technology. In other words, it wouldn't have done you years ago, say 1,000 years ago, any good to find something that you couldn't test with the way it's done now with radiation testing. I mean, everything is going hand in glove. You're looking over here, it's like the old shell game. 3 shells on the table is a pea under one. You're looking at, you've got your eye on one of them, and it's on the wrong one, but you'll never know till it's turned over, and they're not turning it over. They're turning nothing over for you or to you. So hence, what can you do? It sounds hopeless then, doesn't it? It sounds hopeless. You can do nothing. Of course, you have to look at it in another way. If they're keeping it from you, if somebody is hiding something from you, there must be something that you can do if you find out. In other words, there'd be a lot of tumult. There'd be a lot of it would just be hell on earth. The people are trained not to think about anything other than what they've been taught, except perhaps in a science fiction way. if you can look at something that was presented as science fiction, people have written about what I'm doing. I was looking at something that came out of Jessup, Georgia. It was an editor wrote a piece on the editorial page about some material I'd sent in for to take out an ad, and she's making fun of what was written because it's too far-fetched for her understanding. That's okay, and I can understand it because she has been trained, and you have been trained to just, I mean, this what you think you know is what you've been taught. You don't know anything. Perhaps I don't know anything, but I have forced myself to know what I do know, and what I think about is not determined by what other people have forced me to do. When somebody forces me to do something, I'm sure you do the same thing in a certain respect, but to graduate from these schools, it's very difficult for you to be of a creature of your own mind. What bothers me is when you go to a school, for instance, just literature itself. The professor, teacher, they tell you what to read, what book to read, and then they ask you for a critique on it. And a lot of times they want your opinion on it, but they really want their opinion. In other words, tests, just like you get a test where you're looking for a job, you have to have they give you the question, and they want the answer that they want. They don't want your answer. In school, they don't want your observation. Now, school is not a job. You're just in school to learn. Now, you can't learn, and you couldn't learn anything because they didn't want your observation. What they wanted, and what they demanded to give you an A or 100 or whatever score the thing was based on, they wanted you to come back with their answer. And the more of their answers you come back with, the more you get patted on the head. Now you can take this to the bank, okay? You got your Nobel Prize. Okay, your Nobel Prize, you got all the different prizes that are given out to say science, in science. Even in writing, it's all part of the brainwashing. They give you the prize based on what you'd say, say for instance, journalism as opposed to physics. You would say, well, physics is a more solid science. Journalism is more subjective. We can see what in physics there has to be a certain amount of proof. In journalism, it's more or less what goes along with the common good or the common perception. But physics itself, think about it this way. When you go to a school, when people come out of schools, they go into the scientific corporate end as opposed to the scholar, the academic end of it, and now they've been equipped in the school to think about different aspects of physics in a certain way. Now they've been thought about it in various ways over the ages, but as I said before, as the equipment, as the materials change, the perception of what has to be done now changes, and therefore the next logical step will be found by the certain groups of graduates, among that certain group of graduates, because they're dealing with upgrades of the factors that were out there before. So in other words, then they know what they want. They're told what when they work for these people in these organizations, what's expected of them. So naturally, they come up with. Then you'll probably, and people have said, and will continue to say, well, this one guy, he worked in a what is it? Nicholas Tesla worked more or less on his own, away from the GE, and he developed different things on his own. But that's not true. He went to the schools. Nobody sits out on a rock in a desert or lives in a cave and is able to come out of there and start working in a science laboratory. It just doesn't happen. So everything is everything. And don't feel, see, you might feel sometime that this group of scientists or these people that are getting these awards or people that are in these disciplines are elite people compared to what you are. They're not. It's just they go through the same kind of rote. The way it works is that certain people gravitate to certain likes because it could be for a lot of different reasons. Just to make money, just to be patted on the back for this, because their family has been brought up in these different disciplines, which they were beaten into to begin with, probably back. Oh, there's another interesting aspect of what's going on this planet. Now, evolution. Remember Darwin? Remember what was it, the Voyage of the Beagle? Remember you read that, and you read about Darwin going to the Galapagos Islands and about how he decided by looking at these many and various or sundry creatures that there was a linkage between them and other animals on the planet, and there had been a progression of, in other words, an advance in genes is what he's really saying. But we don't know that. That's just a story thrown out there. It's a cover-up story. It doesn't really make any difference whether they're recorded like that or not. But how come, for instance, monkeys or gorillas? I mean, why don't they turn into people? I don't ever remember of late, or how long gorillas have been in captivity, or the way they try to explain it is that there was like the Neanderthal man and these different men that finally evolved. But I think the Frankenstein story makes more sense. Mary Shelley came up with there's another, perhaps science fiction is a way of presenting something that doesn't offend the masses. The religions are ready to jump down anybody's throat, comes up with a different idea. You're a blasphemer if you don't, if you thought that men could have been put apart and women could have been put together in laboratories. But it makes as much sense as the Neanderthal man or the creation or of so-called man on the planet with I mean, for instance, Mary Shelley might have even just gotten the idea from the mere fact that God is supposed to have pulled a rib out of Adam. That's like an operation, right? Maybe he did it surgically and he made Eve out of the rib. Maybe the rib was that was taken out was only one of the parts. Maybe there were other critters around that were. We don't even know if Adam and Eve existed. Probably, I'd say probably not. I don't think any of this stuff matters one way or the other. All that matters is technology. And where is it going? Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. They're going to keep taking it off there. And you know who they are. They don't even know what they're doing. What does it say? Somebody says in the Bible or some of these books about, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That was supposed to have been Jesus when he was up on the cross. And that applies. These managers and these different executive people that you think are in control of something, they're just, they don't know what they're doing. They're just earning money. They'll do anything for money and praise. Maybe you will. Perhaps you will. Perhaps most people will. They got people breaking down the doors to get into this. For instance, this country, they're breaking down the doors to get in to make money. They don't get what they do. They kill for it. I mean, what is wars are just an excuse for killing people. You want to get rid of the people in charge. Want to get rid of. When you're dead. Whether you're in a war or somebody mugs you in an alley. Oh, I know. That they brainwash the children. They brainwash them. They put a uniform on them. But you say, well, there's other sides. See, it's all set up. The other governments are in league with this government. Bush had it right. President Bush came out and said something about we're in the New World Order now. Well, we've always been in the New World Order, except they didn't caption it that way. They had to have, it's like I said before, good and bad. The good army and the bad army. The red army and the blue army. The white army and the green army. They get out there and they put uniforms on these people. They set them up. They put costumes on them so they know who to kill. and what was the purpose of the wars? The purpose of the wars. Let's see, what would it be? Oh, to perfect technology, to perfect ballistics, yes. The tenacity of metal, hey, to make better spears, to make better bullets, yes. Catapults, rifles, cannons. They all seem to be leading up to the big launching pads, the testing of fuels. Oh, you catching on yet? November 28th, 2001. What does it mean? Is it a time to hide? Are you going to sit around for the next 7 years waiting and saying, ha, 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 or, oh no? What are you going to do? Are you going to sit around for 2 more minutes or 2 more hours or 2 more days without wanting to know, demanding of your government that you be allowed and everybody be allowed, and not just members of the press be allowed to go into NASA? I want to go in. People, the street cleaner, huh? The guy who works in the plant down the street, the butcher, the baker, representatives, everybody, open them up. They'll let you go into this. They have a place now NASA has where it's like a museum or a camp. I think it's like a space camp. That's what it is. And you can go there, but that's only contains all the useless artifacts, the left behinds, the slag product of the space program. You believe the people at NASA? Do you believe these people tell the truth? Do you believe them? Do you understand? You watch some news programs that indicate that a lot of the CIA and the different secret organizations around the world keep things from people, swear people to secrecy, whether there's a war or not. Isn't that true? I've seen it. I've known people who've been in places that you wouldn't even think exist, and they're looked at it if they talk before it comes out in the media. Well, I mean, they're like nuts, right? Everything, right, nuts, But you might have or be of the opinion that it's better to keep your mouth shut and not know. In the short run, I suppose that is the best way to go. And if people, what bothers me is when I go back to religion for this, and in some ways it happens in war, where people are have been told to us as being heroes or saints, and these two nomenclatures have been laid on people who have given up things freely, their lives, without any compensation, without somebody giving them money or giving them medals. They've done it just as a natural response to their so-called humanity. I don't see very much of that around anymore. I don't see. I think that, and from what I'm able to observe, that people that would do or espouse such self-sacrifice are thought of as they'd be sent to a psychiatrist, and a psychiatrist would have to inevitably tell them that they were trying to compensate for what they do because of some inadequacy. In other words, there's no saints anymore, and anybody who does anything for nothing, you must have an ulterior motive. Like you're looking at me and you're saying, what is this guy trying to do? What is he trying to tell us? I'm telling it to you, but you're going, what is he trying to tell us? I think I'm trying to tell you that the end of the world is coming, and I'm trying to set it up so you can look at what I'm saying and what is in a different light than you've been looking at it. In other words, you've been looking in not only the wrong direction, but you've been looking through filters. Everything has been filtered for you. In fact, you can't even see me. When you're looking at me and listening to me, you're not seeing me and listening to me because of all the filters, because of all the mindsets that have gone before you came upon me. You're looking at me and you're saying, I wonder what he really means. I wonder what he really wants. You're not thinking about, hey, are we being tricked? It doesn't seem to matter to you because you don't really want to know. You don't. What was that line in a Jack Nicholson movie? You don't want to know the truth. So I was you don't want to know the truth. Something like that. Anyway, you don't want to know. But you're satisfied with that. Because there is no truth, right? You don't believe it. There is no truth. Actually, there isn't. There's no lies either because you use them all the time, right? You tell what do you consider. A lot of people feel like a good liar is really a champion nowadays. I guess it's always been so. The champion, they ought to have there's so many award shows, they ought to have one for, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the world's greatest liar. It's out. It's a name. It's cute. Or are you just a mediocre liar? Or am I just like a secondary, a substandard liar? Anyway, the amazing part of living is that you're going to die. That's an amazing thing. I think that perhaps in years past, people have been able to deal with death. Memento mori, the Italians say. Remember death. They've been able to deal with life because they've been able to deal with death. Nowadays, death is cosmetically disguised. People want to get away from it. They want to look at the made-up body for as little time as possible, and then they want it gone. They don't want to even think that it might start stinking. Push it away, burn it. Take it out of here. But maybe it is good to think about it because you are going to die. Everybody's going to die. Oh yeah? How did you figure that out? Everybody's going to die, except if there's a way and a place where death does not exist. What are these bodies anyway? What are they? They're shells. You're living in a shell that is basically clay or dust. Which will eventually deteriorate. I think we went through that before, but you're living in a shell. Some people have a better looking shell than others. Some people spend their whole life priming up their shell, huh? Yeah, it's got to keep that shell looking good, because that's all people see. And perhaps you're one of the people that your essence, your spirit, some people call it your soul, becomes your shell. You can't think beyond your shellish existence. I guess for you, well, what I'm saying is meaningless, but you still have an ego. You'd still like to live forever. Some people go, I don't want to live forever. You're living forever. The reason you probably don't want to live forever is because things keep changing. You keep getting older. Your mind starts slipping away. You start realizing your body won't keep up with your mind. But if you lived in a state where there was a constant understanding or realization of an ever-changing life that was both fascinating and wonderful. Now, see, I can't really say that outside of space such a place exists. Nobody. I can't say nobody. I've not seen it. All I can do is bring myself and you to the precipice and not jump, but try to see what's out there beyond what we've been allowed to see. I'm trying to allow you to see more than what you dig they have allowed you to see, and you're saying, oh, there's the they again, it's them, they're out there doing it. Well, of course they are. They all work for it. It's true. It controls it all. And they work for it, and you are they if you go along with. I don't think it even cares about you at all. In other words, this concept of a God is a strange one. And of course there are many gods, if there are gods. I mean, just the idea of God, if there are many gods, there are many ideas of gods. You, as an individual, your concept of God, let me tell it to you just straight. I don't care what you think about it. I really don't. Your concept of God is you, all-knowing. You, all-magnificent. It's you. That's why the personalized God, the Jesus, God works with people. It's the thinking man's God, because you are a part of the body of Christ. That's the way to explain it. You are a brother of Christ. You're a son of God. You're the children of God. If gods existed, the existence of a god or gods would be similar, but beyond even the similarity between an ant and a human being. An ant has more awareness of a human being, and a human being, a man or woman, has more awareness of an ant than a god has of you, or you of a god. What you've got an awareness of is the baloney, the hyperbole, or hyperbole, or the BS that somebody made up. A lot of people, I mean, why do people make things up? They make things up to control you. The tribal chiefs, they were able to come up with incantations to the wind. Well, the wind, the smart guy would know the wind would start after a while. But if you can scare the tribe into thinking, hey, the wind may never stop, well, you just keep praying. Pretty soon it's going to stop, and they're going to say, hey, he stopped it. It wasn't going to stop. I know it wasn't going to stop. And pretty soon they bring in bread and loaves of bread and then whatever they got there to this guy, and he's going, you know, I did it again, you know. If there's a fire or there's a plague, you know, it's going to stop. It doesn't. He can't have nothing to lose anyway, because everybody will be dead. But this is where these gods came from. The gods that people worship. I don't know. What is it? Do they worship? People know how to worship. I hear people using that word. I don't know if they know what they're talking about. I don't think that the average person who goes to one of these churches or studies this stuff really knows what they're... They really can't explain it. It's just a crutch. It's just an easy way out. It's easier than thinking, hey, there's something happening. There's something happening that scares the crap out of me to think about. There's something out there. I'm talking about out there on this planet. There's something going on. Where did we really come from? Where? What are we? You wouldn't want to come to the realization that you're an appendage of it. There's something that is maybe even weaker than you in its state on this planet. Maybe that's why it has to cajole you. Maybe that's why it has to kiss up to, seemingly, to its lieutenants, and eventually to you in some respects, by making sure that you have big screen TV, a VCR, and a ticket to Disneyland every once in a while. These are the rewards. What do you get? What do you get for all you're doing? You get a bed to sleep in, perhaps an apartment or a house that contains the bed, a nice shower where you can come back. In other words, you wash yourself and you feed yourself to go back to work, to continue feeding the behemoth known as the worldwide space program. You laughing? Are you laughing yet? Is there an it, and an opposing it, like a god and a devil? Who cares? First well, why not? But you haven't even gotten to the point yet where you can accept the fact that everybody's been had, that everybody is asleep. Because you're acting out. You're doing your work in a dreamlike state. You're in a trance. You've been hypnotized. That's what training is. It's hypnosis. Then you say, well, what would I do if I wasn't hypnotized? What would I do? Just do nothing? What would life be about? You don't know, because you've never been exposed to what's really going on, so you don't know. So it's easier to just say, well, it's got to be happening the way they said it was, otherwise there'd be nothing. And I've told you before, there's no such thing as nothing. Everything is something. Oh, yes. In fact, all words are lies. They're mere approximations of what you mean to say, and they're based on what you've been taught to say. Everything has been defined for you. There's a dictionary. There's one over here somewhere. There's another one over there. I've got a couple of them. They've got words in there. Words. You've been taught to think in words. The words apply, like E. What does E mean? E. What is like alpha or beta? What do they mean? It's like it's a store somewhere. They're Greek, huh? It's all Greek to me, but they've been able to do it. They've been able to put words in your mouth. In the dictionary, you have to go there or to school to find out what the words mean, because they don't understand you. They don't want to know you if you point to stuff. They've taught you in words. It's a code. People think, well, for instance, music is a code. Or science with its terminology, that's a code. Or foreign languages are a code. All languages are code. There's nothing written on a rock that says rock. Everything that you know, everything that you are, is based on what somebody else wants you to be aware of, how somebody else wants you to react. Pardon me. It's really good. Anyway. You've been victimized. And I'm trying to help you to realize you've been victimized, and you're saying, I don't want to know if I've been victimized. Why should I want to know what's going to happen November 28, 2001? How many people are going to escape from this planet? Or will there be any people aboard? Is there a chance for me if there is an escape? Will there be selective like a lottery, or will it be based on the most intimidated, the most productive because of the intimidation? Who will be aboard these ships? You're saying, these ships are not going anywhere. We build ships to go nowhere. We build them to go to, like, you wouldn't build a ship to go into the sun. Now that might be the closest you could ever think of as being like hell. So the sun is hell. When people look up in the sky, they don't go, well, I hope I don't go to the sun. They say, I hope I don't see this mythical. They got this mythical thing, this place that waits for you after you're dead. But after you're dead, there's nothing. Why should there be anything? Why should there be anything after you're dead? You have to live to achieve life everlasting. It's life everlasting. This concept, this misguided concept of you have to be born again, you have to die to be born, is madness. It's absolutely, it makes no sense. Anybody with a brain, with a logical brain, or if there is such a thing, could never conceive of the fact that you could die, you die to live again. And yet these guys get up on these podiums and on these pulpits and they up on these altars, and they espouse this thing, this concept, this misguided and calculated concept that you're going to die and still live. It's just impossible. I think most people realize that, but there are a lot of I don't mean to say nuts, but I mean people that have just stopped learning. They just heard this and it sounds, well, it's easy. See, it's easy. Well, somebody would say, well, it's easy for me to think, well, hey, these spaceships are escaping. But it's not easy to think that, because you're not thinking it. You can't conclude it because you have not had the experience. You've not given yourself or never sought to challenge what you've been taught. It's not easy. This concept is of living after you die is readily available. It's thrown out, don't cost anything. Hey, live after you're dead. Here, do this. Just give us a little money here, lay some bread at our feet. Okay, that's it. You've been a good boy, good girl. You're going to live after you're dead. Just keep repeating after me. God is great. That's it. Praise God. Praise, this, which they don't use. Is there God? Does it look like Jesus? Does it look like what? Does it have a look? Is it a pure spirit? How do you associate with a pure spirit? How do you know when you're in the presence of it, or if it's all over the place? How can it be one place when it's all encompassing? Or it's God is everything. God is the universe. God is outside the universe, heaven and hell. That God is the devil. God is everything. Is there, like the old saying, is there a rock that's big enough that God can't lift it? But, so, let's get into and then this thing about science, see, it's really label science to separate it from the masses, to keep things segmented, see, is the goal of any kind of a plan. It's like when the old kings, a lot of them, not old, I don't know, I haven't really personally checked on this with the old kings, I wasn't there, but it is known that many of the castles that were built, particularly in Europe, I imagine in every other kingdom as well, they contained secret passageways that the kings used to escape if the enemy was coming, or to hide gold or precious things. And as these secret chambers were built, the builders would be taken out and killed. Therefore, the only person who knew what these things were was, and as other chambers and whatever series of chambers were built, each group would be taken out and killed, and therefore it remained secret. In other words, segmenting things is a way to keep a secret. In other words, you're only allowed to know what's necessary for you to fulfill your mission, and your mission is whatever you do. Like I said before, you can be shining shoes. You might be shining an astronaut shoes. If you're not shining an astronaut shoes, you might be shining the shoes of somebody who makes bread for the astronaut, or makes television programs for the astronaut to look at, or makes cars the astronaut can ride around in. It's all the pyramid of the social pyramid that's been built is unassailable in a sense, because you're as part of it, even though you may not like it or wish it to be otherwise, you subconsciously don't know any other way, so you come to accept it. You don't have to like things to accept them, but there you are, you're locked in, and this pyramid, this social pyramid, has been built with one at the top. There's always one point or one peak at the top of everything, and that's the it, and they are close to the top, and maybe you're them, we're them, maybe down here at the bottom, we're them, the great multitude of the unwashed, those who have no glimmer. You know, like you could, for instance, I hate to say like Pope lives over in Rome, and he's got this Swiss guard that guards him, and he's got all these gold items and robes made out of silk, and he's supposed to be the visible image of Christ on earth. Well, Christ, I thought, was a carpenter, and I don't ever recall any gold things being associated with him. But they've been able to sell this thing. It's like it's a tacit understanding among people that things that are right. If the church or the Pope lives in this luxury, it's really poverty, but it's a disguised form of poverty. If he has a mountain home or a vacation home, or he has all these different things available to him, it's really that we're showing the respect that we didn't show to Jesus, because Jesus really didn't need it and he never asked for it, supposedly, if Jesus ever existed. But here these entities are in place. Now the Pope may not be your cup of tea, but say you belong to the Masons or the Rosicrucians, or say you belong to you're a fan of a game, or it's all like a fan comes from fanatic. Oh, and another thing I wanted to talk about, see, it's all the cults. This is very difficult. We had the cult at Waco. I'm sure everyone has seen the pictures of the cult being burnt, the cult residence being burnt, and 70, 80 people, children included, which wouldn't make any difference with children. I mean, if I'm burning, I heard, maybe there's more of me, I heard more than a child would, but this was done in the name of I don't know what the name of what. It was done in the name of the United States government. At first, these people were attacked by the alcohol and tobacco people. They came in full gear. They came in combat gear to arrest this guy, and it's David Koresh, and I don't know David Koresh from a hole in the wall, but is the government able to label somebody? Once the fighting had taken place, they tried to break into this place, and these people had guns, and the government had guns, and they fought it out, and 4 of the alcohol and tobacco people were killed. Then the wheels of propaganda went ahead and started to label these people as child molesters, as living immoral lives other than child molesting, and that had a big cache of guns that wasn't allowed, and they were a cult. That was the cover for the whole thing. They were a cult. In other words, they believed in some weird concepts that, and the weird concepts were the ones that were broadcast by the media and printed were the fact that David Koresh was trying to define the book of Ecclesiastes about the end of the world, when the end of the world was coming, and he kept begging for more time, and finally the patience of the government. If the person is weak or thinks that the aggressor thinks that they might suffer an equal amount of punishment, they won't be aggressive. The first people who went in there thought they could just walk in and walk over these people. The second group didn't even come to talk anymore. They just said, to hell with these people. They went in, they burnt them alive, and that was it. But this guy was supposedly trying to forget about all these different accusations they made. I mean, nobody's got a right to break into people's houses or anything, whatever, claiming they're a cult, and go in and annihilate them, man, woman, and child, because of the fact that they just didn't like them. I mean, for whatever reason. Perhaps it is something tied into what I'm saying, is that they had defined or found something about the end of the world. And if you find something out about the end of the world, you're finding something out about the present. You're finding something about the near future. You're finding, in other words, the end doesn't just, everybody lays down and dies because there's the end. That's not what's happening. There's a space program being built. There are people in place for doing all these different machinations, contributing to this thing. So whatever he was trying to do, we never found out. But he was studying, he was trying to find out these different 7 points in the Ecclesiastes about, I forget what it was, trying to define them. I've read about it and read the whole thing, but I don't even recall. It didn't make any sense to me because I think that that's more of a boogeyman kind of thing, but he has the right, just as any person has a right to be a Dodger fan or a Yankee fan or a Rams fan or whatever, Trojan fan or whatever. He has a right, according to the so-called tenets of this country, America, to pursue any type of thinking that he wants, and a group can do anything they want. They were in a compound, and it was something similar to the been compounds here before. There was one at Narabo, I think. What was it? The Mormon compound. These people lived in community. The Israelis do it. They have the kibbutzes. People have lived. The people that were originally that owned this land, or they try to say they were like nomads. They lived in tribes. They believed in the wind and they believed in the gods of the elements. And of course they were killed off too, or a lot of them subjugated. But that's okay. We're not talking about that. This is something that occurs in America in the 1990s, close to the time that a lot of people, even in religion, think is the millennium, and we're claiming is a time that the technology will be available for the leap across space. These people were killed, and the whole ignoring of it is predicated on the fact that they were a cult. I mean, that's basically I think it's unarguable. I got it out. That this cult status can be bestowed on anybody who challenges or defines and gathers together. This is why End of the World Enterprises Incorporated calls for no gatherings, no movement in as far as membership or a communal way of life is concerned. Just telling you what's going on The government at that point has to eliminate us, or whoever's the eliminators. That's the way it is. We're not taking anybody with us. We're looking for people to look. This is the thing. This is your role. You have to look realistically at what's going on. Now, I've been explaining to you, trying to explain to you, the conclusions that I've come to, or we've come to, in looking, we think, realistically at the hardware, not at the dreams, not at the aspirations, not at anything except the hardware. Okay? The history of this planet, I think I've said it before, and I shall say it again, the history of this planet is not one of people. It's not about Cher. It's not about Princess Diana. It's not about Richard III. It's not about Caesar. It's not about Moses. It's not about Adam and Eve. It's about hardware. It's about the elements of this earth that are being taken and fashioned, are being molded into spaceships. That's what it's about. So when you read history, they're misleading you and misguiding you by you getting into this personal thing about whose son was this guy, and this guy begat this guy, and this other guy begot that guy, and this guy on this date went here. It's only the building, the pyramids, technology at its best for that time. The Empire State Building for its time. One of the world's greatest achievements. Yes. The Eiffel Tower. There's something in physics to be learned from it. Yes. Why is it left there like that? Yes. A list. Yes. The history of technology. It's not what's taught. It's a history of people. I think you have to actually take a discipline to really get into, like if you wanted to study electricity, you'd have to talk about Michael Faraday. You don't need that to know electricity. But they try to personalize it, you see, so that you won't all of a sudden conclude, hey, wait a minute, this technology stands out here as being something that applies not to people, if it's not personalized. It really isn't about people, it's about something else. It's about the technology itself. It's like, it's similar to robotics. They try to personalize a robot. Remember, you've read the book 2001: A Space Odyssey? HAL is the computer. Give the computer a name to personalize it. So you think more about the personalization and about the person, HAL, than you do about the computer, or they're intertwined. By itself, it becomes more remote, more difficult to deal with. What is it about? Say, even though it could speak without a name, why does it have to speak to begin with? It's really not necessary, or maybe it is. But the speaking should always be kept as part of the overall picture, not HAL, like this one bad computer, or this computer that starts to feel its oats. Anyway, it's difficult for you, isn't it? To think again. You've thought many thoughts, but to think, you might say, well, wait a minute, we're still not thinking our thoughts if we're thinking your thoughts. You want us to think your thoughts, and you want to take your thoughts, and you want them to supersede the thoughts that we've been taught. When do we get to think? Well, that's what I want you to do. But the thing about it, you see, is that you were not taught how to think. You were taught what to think. Now I'm talking about another thing to think of, a vaster understanding than what has been taught. All that you've been taught is about concepts, and I'm talking about hardware. The concepts you've been taught have been taught to you to get you to respond to what you're responding to now. You're part and parcel of the ongoing technology that you don't know or are not expected to know what it's all about. It's good to sit silently sometimes and just think. Meditation is a key factor. A lot of people have realized that, but they keep associating that then with not what's going on, but about nothing. Meditate on nothing to clear your mind and just keep it clear, and therefore you eliminate headaches and stress, which is a good thing. But how about meditating on what I'm talking about and forming conclusions of your own? But then it wouldn't be popular, would they? In other words, is it a lost cause what I'm talking about? Or is there a cause? Or am I talking to you because I want you... See, first of all, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to someone who might be aware of what I'm talking about, who might have something to add to what I'm talking about. Or I'm talking to you as you develop perhaps beyond what I'm talking about to help me. See, I am greedy. And there's nothing wrong with greed. There's a connotation about greed. Of course, it's a question of what you're greedy about. Knowledge is the most important. And not knowledge to be praised, but knowledge to know. Knowledge to be able to look in the right direction for what's really going on. If you're looking in the wrong direction, you can have all the knowledge. You can have all the written records of what went on before and looking in the wrong direction, but you're still looking in the wrong direction. You can be working on the right stuff, and looking in the wrong direction. You're over here, it's like your hands are over here doing what you've been taught to do, and your mind is thinking about what somebody's telling you it is that you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. You think you know what you're doing. You do know what you're doing, but you don't know what you're doing. I confused myself. It's wonderful to confuse yourself. In fact, I think that's how I came to this understanding. I was sitting one day listening to somebody expounding on life. And I thought, this is really confusing. I don't think that guy knows what he's talking about. He's taking a metaphysical approach. I was dealing with metaphysicians. A metaphysical approach to something that is just physical. Hardware. Do I keep it in there? Anyway, what is it you'd like to know? Besides everything. See, isn't that a wild way of thinking? Knowing everything? That's almost like being dogmatic and saying there's an absolute. Knowing everything would be everything. Everything. Now, see, that's away from metaphysics, isn't it? Knowing everything. Thing is physical. A thing. So you would know everything. Now, that wouldn't be boring, but some people might think, well, knowing everything would be boring because then where would there be to go with it? But see, knowing everything doesn't assure you that you're going to know what to do with everything, or is the assumption that if you knew everything, you'd know what to do with it. But there may be endless possibilities. Maybe there are limited. All possibilities may be relative. I don't know that. But all the possibilities doesn't mean, it's like in the space program. Telling you a whole lot of possibilities for the space program doesn't necessarily preclude the fact that there is one reason for the space program. There's one reason for the hardware, which is a result of which is incorporated in the space program. But the thing is, there is one reason for it because it's one way of going. In other words, there's been a course set for the space program that is not all-encompassing. Certain equipment is being built. It's not all kinds of equipment to go everywhere or to go even one specific place in space. Would you go to Jupiter? Could you think your son or daughter or yourself would be an astronaut and go to Jupiter? What is on Jupiter that anybody would want or could even deal with? Is there any kind of metal or any kind of material that could survive the climate of Jupiter? No. It would be stupid to bear that expense. Okay, now we have spaceships. The expense is enormous, no matter what they tell you, because the amounts are hidden in budgets worldwide of different governments. You're paying with your life's blood for this technology, and it's not going just. I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I said it before, and I'll say it again. The technology is geared for one specific reason, not a myriad of possibilities. But they'd like you to think that, but just check out what's going on. They're talking now about a space wheel. That could be a decoy. The shuttles themselves could be decoys, and perhaps are. They're good to train teams of astronauts. We have more teams of astronauts now than we had. I said we, right? That the connotation is America. Okay, there are teams of astronauts in other countries. Teams of people who are capable and are veterans of going into space are necessary to test the equipment that I claim is now being developed in clandestine vaults worldwide. You don't quite, you're saying that we're being hoodwinked. I think that's what I have been saying. And that if and when it's found out, it'll only be found out. It was like the stealth bomber was a secret, and that was used as a subterfuge because other stuff is being built that is directly related, more related but the technology in the stealth is being applied to other space vehicles that are now being built secretly. You want the names and addresses? There are bases in this world that you can't get into, nobody can get into, and there are no impending wars that we know of. You might think, well, hey, the Chinese, now it's not a wild card, the Chinese are out there, a great big nation like that, they're very militaristic. They're involved in the space program with this country and with the New World Order. Their people are paying. In fact, there was a news item the other day about the Chinese, for the first time, are now being individually taxed, and that the tax collector, they go around, they have an actual tax collector like they used to have in countries like this before we had the automatic systems we have now in place. They go around to the Chinese people and they want to collect the tax from them, and the Chinese were killing them, beating them. They thought, what is this guy comes up, he wants our money? I mean, think about it. I mean, they're taking your money, and in countries like this, and they euphemistically say, you're paying your tax. It's not your tax. And you're not paying, they're taking it. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying that it's being taken from you, and you're sitting back, and your mouth, people say it all the time, I didn't pay my tax, or I've got to pay my tax, or I owe on my taxes. See, it's all, they got you saying my and your. Not, it's their tax. They're the ones who are taxing. In fact, they're very taxing. But anyway, the Chinese here, because they're unsophisticated, right? Sophistication is another form of complete slavery. Anyway, you're paying for this program that has put no bread on your table. It's giving you a TV, you could say, because it's a slag product of the space program. But first of all, the populations that exist now, I think I touched on it, I was trying to touch on this before. The populations that exist right now are unofficial, I shouldn't say unofficial, what I meant to say was, let me get it right, get it out there, are unnatural. they're official already, but they're unnatural populations. People have bred beyond nature's I could say nature's orders, or nature's the natural breeding patterns of human beings have been become unnatural because of the experimenting on people with drugs and medicines. There are people living now. The population would never have gone among the animal kingdom. The spread of a population would never get like this. What would exist on this planet if things were left to their own devices? Were small communities, small tribes of people who would maintain steady populations. But this is not what's happening. You know it's unnatural. You know it's unnatural, and it's claimed now that if the world, they don't say if the world lived to 2020 or lasted till the year 2020, that the population will then again double in size or something like that, which is, it's outlandish, except if there's a need for workers on a basis. First of all, they're always going to project, if the world is coming to an end, November 28, 2001, the powers that be will always project beyond it with seemingly realistic visions of a future that they want you to think is ongoing and completely possible. They're not going to let any kind of a scenario exist that just stops right at the precipice of 2001. So what we're dealing with is deviousness on the grand scale. There's a population out there. You have no input. They have groups called population control. They have then they're counterbalanced by people who are against abortion, which I'm not for or against. I don't think it's a good idea, but people have their own, left to their own devices, should be able to do within reason what they want to do with themselves. But the population has just, there are strains showing up now in different diseases that were completely unknown to people before, because nature keeps wanting to balance because we are part of the overall animal population and living everything living. We're part of the germ to mastodon living entities on this planet. So one group or several or myriad different organisms are set up or have been set in place by nature. But now we want to define nature. That's another story. I can define it for you. Nature is what was left of the experiments. In other words, there were many experiments took place on this planet when the breath of it's almost like the breath of God was blown into the dirt. That shows up in the Bible, something like that. But I claim it was like a female spirit who mated with the dirt of the planet, something similar. Okay, and in this mating came forth not exactly man or womankind immediately, but different variations of life, till finally the Frankenstein effect came into being, where the different parts were put, and these experiments obviously or maybe or could have taken place over eons of time, and therefore the other organisms on the planet came into being to balance and to give more variety, to be made available for the final product, man, womankind. The population, therefore, up until this time, was allowed to be controlled by the natural forces, the other critters who were parasitic or basically probably parasitic, who were killing off populations with different plagues and so on and so forth to level the population. Till close to the end time when the technology would be available. The technology taking so long to get to the point where we are in the 20th century now demands and can the widespread workforce to attack technology on many fronts, to perfect many different elements that are needed for these escape vehicles. So, in other words, killing devices for these organisms have been put in place in the 20th century. DDT and different chemicals to kill off different inoculations, different antitoxins, have been brought into being by the trained medical sciences to kill off the organisms that were keeping the weaker. After all, because life is the survival of the fittest. It's now in a natural state because of these medicines, because more workers are needed on the human landscape to handle this. But some of these, as we all know, with in the development of bacterias and insecticide, pesticides, and all kinds of sides, the strains develop within the organisms that make them resistant to this killing, and therefore these strains become more difficult to deal with. AIDS being one of them, the proliferation of cancer and the proliferation of all kinds of abnormalities in the human family. We want to call it the human family, but even as I speak, people are trying to develop other natural forms of pesticides to kill off the AIDS and other viruses, and they're using different homeopathic methods, and in fact every discipline is being used because these people are necessary. In other words, because the organisms that were once needed to level off the population are not needed anymore. That doesn't mean they disappear. What they've done is they've just kept going, and they've mutated, and we've all been aware of the mutations that exist in the planet ever since, for instance, the proliferation of atomic and radiation particles have been widespread. But we're not dealing in beliefs here. We're dealing in facts, and we're dealing in projections of known, say, like, for instance, news releases or news bulletins. We have to, they have to give us little bits of stuff so that we can deal with things that they find necessary to the space program. So there is a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, or fortunately, very few people have been able to put it together as this person has. I don't want to know the whole price, thank you. But I want you to learn more than me. I want you to go and piggyback off of what I'm talking about to come and help me. Because, like I said, the whole idea of things being made known, we've all got to work together to. I wouldn't know anything, but for what I'm able to glean from what's out there. If there's nothing out there, I can come up with nothing. So I have to get it someplace, and you have to take what I've gotten and try to clean your mind. It's like a colonics in a way of the mind. You have to be able to clean all the garbage out of your mind and just keep in your mind what you absolutely can trust, the most trusting of things that have been presented to you, and mix them with what I'm saying, and or what you glean from what I'm saying. See, I'm not expecting you to take from what I say the pure me. It's the same in all education. It's what happens is in a good education, even if it's for suspect reasons, to achieve something, it isn't just exactly what's said that you learn from. It's what you're able to put together from a variety of different of the parts of what you're learning that you may be able to pick up on better than somebody else who is trying to be keep the chronology or the structure or the cataloging of things in their mind, and they remain separate. It's those who can put them together in their mind. Maybe perhaps it's done subconsciously. It happens in the subconscious mind that all these things in some people's minds meld and create something that's physically useful to the space program. That's all that it's about. But that's everything it's about. It's everything and nothing. Okay, now, what about government? We talked about the tax, or I talked about the tax situation. Do we need governments? Nobody's asking us if we need them, they're there. Don't you love, or don't you appreciate, or, I'm being sarcastic, people saying, we need government, like, if we didn't need it, we found out we didn't need it, it was going to go away, without a fight. I mean, who's got all the guns? I mean, I think, people talk about the taxpayer. Well, I mean, pretty soon in China, what they're going to be doing with these people who kill the taxpayers. They'll be sending the taxpayers, with sidearms and an escort, and just like they do here. If you don't like the IRS and you thumb your nose at them, they don't do a comedy skit about your your reluctance to deal with them. What they do is they come around with a gun and a bat and you beat the. I mean, this is the way it deals. So in other words, what you think about government really is immaterial, except that you think you have some input. And on perhaps minor issues you do, but usually the government has already achieved what they want by the time they get around to putting it up to you for a vote or for your acceptance. I don't know, you said, well, I don't know, how can we check this guy out? Check it out. Check it out. Check out what I'm saying. I am just, I'm somebody, when I'm talking to you, see, I'm opening myself up to ridicule. Everybody that does, it's like being an actor or any kind of public speaker. You're laying your ideas out there, and the other people can go, oh, look at him, what does he know? But that's all part of the space program. In other words, I have to say what I have to say because something is causing me to say it. There's some, in other words, at this point in time, somebody like me comes along and tells you this because this is necessary. It's necessary that you know what I'm telling you. You have to determine what the necessity is, where the necessity goes for you. For me, it goes, I want to get aboard the ships, okay? Or not okay with you, but the point is, you're going to help me get aboard. The governments are going to help me get aboard. It's my reward. That sounds kind of like, it sounds a little bit mad, doesn't it? But if you were alive, or you don't know, if you were alive a couple of thousand years ago, would you think that anybody would be talking about getting aboard an airplane, a jet plane? Would you? You wouldn't even know what they were talking about. I mean, you know what, somebody said something could fly or something, but anyway, you get the idea. In other words, I'm saying the space program is flying. I mean, flying in more than one way. The other way, besides the physical flight, is the idea and the destination are on target. Okay, now you have to be able to figure out if you can get aboard, or if you want to get aboard, or if you even have any kind of a glimmer of what I'm talking about. It may be that you have no interest in anything at all, except maybe you don't have an interest in anything, you just live. There's a lot of people like that, they just live, and they figure, well, you die. Maybe they don't even figure it, maybe you just live, and just like an animal. There's an animal like a dog, another animal besides man. There's an animal like a dog or a cat. Do they think about dying, or do they think about life? Do they think, what they probably think about is like, oh, that was pretty good food. I wonder if they even think, or is it just at the instant they're eating the food, or if they're in a better environment, they're just there, and they're just eating it, and they don't think about it. Maybe they don't think about anything. It's just all pure instinct. They just do, and that's it. There's no gradation of any kind of enjoyment or punishment or anything else. If you're getting hit, they're just hit, that's all. People seem to be trying to define everything. Isn't that what I'm trying to do? This is what people seem to be. Isn't that what you do when you look at something, for instance, a news show or a commentary show, like, for instance, what is it, This Week with David Brinkley, as an example. A lot of people look at this thing on Sunday mornings. They look at it because they want to hear erudite evaluations of their world. What is David Brinkley up to now? What are George Will and who's the other guy? Cokie Roberts, one of the girl, and what's his name? Sam Donaldson. What did they want to hear these experts define for them what has gone on a week prior so that they can know where things are going or how things are. So people do want to know things, don't they? But how about the bigger picture? Maybe what these people on the David Brinkley show and these other shows are showing you are just trivia. They're just footnotes, more footnotes in that history of personalities. People defining for you. They're always defining. You don't know anything, do you? Well, you know it. So you don't know anything from yourself. You don't put yourself on the line to try to find out. In other words, if you question things, you have a tough life. I've suffered so much, you won't believe it. It's true. Suffering, pains. You wouldn't believe it if I told you I was 35 years old, would you? Just suffer, I suffer. 25, how about 25? That's even better. But see, it costs you to learn. So you'd rather look at television than get the quick fix. That's what it is. Television, or even reading the paper, sometimes you get a little more information. But it's usually about stuff that, it's all about stuff that, it's throwaway stuff, you know. Here's what's going on in Somalia or Haiti, or here's what's going on, not what's going on down at NASA this afternoon, or taking you into the conference room. You don't even get in when you see these big, you know, big shot reporters, Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, or who's the other guy? Tom Brokaw, or it's David, what's his name? Shaw, the guy from CNN. When you see him, see these guys on there going, they follow the big leaders up into this big, usually a big mansion type place, and they go into these rooms where they're going to have these conferences, or they go in for private meetings. You don't know what's going on in here. These great reporters are outside and they're running after them, sniffing after these guys like dogs. What conclusions did you come to about, you know, blowing up the world today? They throw them out a few tidbits of maybe complete lies, and then they have, see, that's bad enough. Then you get on like these shows then with commentary or evaluating it, okay, like Washington News and Review or something like that, Washington Week in Review, or something like that. They're evaluating all this stuff for you because you're not capable of evaluating it. But what are they evaluating? They're evaluating what their reporter got outside the door when these guys walk out after having a couple of whiskeys and talking about, we're going to kick the living gazebos out of so-and-so. They don't tell the reporters that. And you're getting a commentary on this cleaned up version of maybe nothing. Maybe it didn't even exist or ever take place. Oh, and here I am talking to you. I'm talking to you. And they say you're an unknown, or no, I bet you're not a knowing victim of this. You don't think you're being had. You think you know something, don't you? I'm here to tell you you don't know anything. I know just a little bit more than nothing, but at least I'm willing to admit it. It's pretty hard to admit things. Nobody wants to say, hey, we've been had all our lives. We're suckers. We went out and bought that TV. We got a 50-inch TV. We can look down, what's his name? We can see David Brinkley's tonsils, you know. We got that. We're on the inside. We're the knowers. The poor slobs, the guy sitting in the street there trying to get a buck. You don't know anything. You know, you might not know anything more. You might know, the guy in the street might know more than you because at least he's not being fed all this pablum. That deteriorates your brain. That could lead to a brain hemorrhage. Listen to these guys every week. Yeah. But it's the same reason you might read the Wall Street Journal, or you might read the Time magazine or the American Spectator or any of these things. They're just, you're forming opinions about somebody else's opinions. Anyway, let me get back. Let's see, it's November 28, 2001. It's the space program. It's the technology on the planet, the depersonalization of history, the debunking of religion, the idea of money. Did I speak about the idea of money? Quickly, money is a fraud. It's just a concept. There's nothing physical about it, especially the paper money we know, and even gold. If you had gold and there were a big calamity and there was no bread around, it wouldn't produce bread. You couldn't grow wheat with gold. Try making gold seeds and plant them in the ground. But anyway, it's a concept. It's a controlling mechanism. And let me go back to taxes. They don't even want your taxes. The idea of taxes is it was set up so seemingly they need the taxes. The organization, the bureaucracy was set up to feed off the taxes because they have to justify them in some way for you. But the taxes are a training mechanism. They're obedience training. They could take the money right out of your pocket, which they do through pay-as-you-go, right out of your check before you get it if you happen to be a wage earner. They take it right out of there. They could do it just electronically, and you wouldn't even have to, they could work the whole thing so you'd never give you a refund or whatever. Why should you even have a refund? I mean, all these is stupid. They just made this thing complicated to create, what it does is creates a technology that uses the slag product of the computers. They're using computers like crazy. It creates a demand for computers. It justifies the computerization that goes into the space program. It all leads to the same place. What can I tell you? They don't need your taxes. They need your obedience. By filling that form out or having somebody do it for you, you're aware that they're watching you day and night, whereas if they just kept this thing on a scale where they just took it, they just want the money, you know, that's what you think. They want the money, they think. They know who are they and who is it and who are them. Try to remember that. I know you won't, but try. Oh, I know you will. You'll remember me, but I won't remember you because I can't see you. Send me your picture, yes. Anyway, you haven't seen our book, have you? Art Warp at the End of the World. It's $10. I'm just throwing this in at the end. It's a book of, there are a lot of faux pas in it which were intentionally done, or you might say unintentionally, to make the thing look all stupid because we were actually in fear of our lives when we put out the book. You understand that, don't you? We're claiming all this stuff, so we made it look ridiculous by making a lot of mistakes in it. It's a book of errors. It's $10. End of the World Enterprises, Suite 332, 11684 Ventura Boulevard, Studio City, California, 91604. And our phone number. Can you call in for our number yet? Not for our number, but to listen to our number, our little phone message. The phone number is 818-241-5966. I don't know what else to tell you. I could tell you much more, but I think the tape is running out. But anyway, so what you want to do now is get the book. You looked at me and you've listened, hopefully, and from my stuttering and stammering presentation, I hope you've glimmered something. I hope you've glimmered. Just a little inkling, a tiny inkling of my integrity and my honesty in presenting this off the cuff. I'm not reading any notes or anything, and I'm just trying to, because what I've done is, and I think what happens in everybody's mind is, as you talk extemporaneously, you start to create new ideas in your mind. Your mind might I might have said something on this, on what's preceded this, preceded now, that I may not have, in a formal presentation, have hit upon. Plus the fact that it's not important whether it's formally presented. I'm not trying to win any award or I'm not trying to beguile you with my great personality, which, I'm just just a humble person trying to bring to you in a straightforward manner my thoughts on everything. The thinker. That's what you want to be. You want to think about all this. Don't be glib. I don't want to be glib. I don't want you to be glib either. You can be whatever you want. I mean, you will be. Why do I say that? It sounds like, I'm looking for some control over you. The control I have to have is over myself. That's the control, the only control. That's, all these things like are out of the philosophers talking about know yourself, and they're basically all true. The dialogues of Plato and Aristotle, Socrates, these were all more profound dialogues than we have now in the current marketplace. Maybe it's because there is a marketplace that everything has become so glib and so self-centered and so celebrity. Reporters are celebrities now. When I think about the philosophers of old, I imagine they had egos too, but nothing to the extent of what is currently available. Everything is marketing now. Hopefully not this. We did want to sell this tape, only to make more tapes. So we perchance can help someone to think more clearly. I think that's more clearly about everything. To see is to know. Remember, it can't be getting any closer to the beginning. It can't be getting any closer to the beginning.